The Grey Rock Method. How to become invisible to toxic people. There are people in your life who drain your energy. They create drama wherever they go. They thrive on conflict, attention, and chaos. You've tried being nice to them. You've tried reasoning with them. You've tried avoiding them completely. Nothing works. They keep finding ways to pull you into their dysfunction. But what if I told you there's a psychological technique so powerful that it can make you completely invisible to these people? What if you could become so uninteresting to toxic individuals that they naturally move on to easier targets? This technique is called the Grey Rock Method. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why it's one of the most effective psychological defense strategies ever developed. You'll learn how to protect your mental energy, maintain your peace of mind, and neutralize toxic people without confrontation, without drama, and without becoming toxic yourself. The Grey Rock Method was originally developed by psychologists to help people deal with narcissistic abuse, but its applications go far beyond clinical settings. This technique can be used with manipulative colleagues, energy-draining family members, attention-seeking friends, and anyone else who seems determined to make your life more complicated than it needs to be. Here's the fundamental principle. Toxic people are like emotional vampires. They feed on reactions. They need attention, drama, and emotional responses to feel alive. When you give them what they're looking for, you reinforce their behavior. You become their source of supply. But when you become completely uninteresting, when you offer nothing for them to feed on, they naturally move on to someone else who will give them what they crave. Think about a grey rock sitting in a field. It's unremarkable, uninteresting, and invisible. You might walk past it 1,000 times without noticing it's there. It doesn't call attention to itself. It doesn't react to the weather. It just exists, solid and unmovable, but completely boring. This is exactly what you want to become in the presence of toxic people. The psychology behind this method is brilliant. Toxic individuals are driven by a need for control and stimulation. They start conflicts because conflict is exciting. They create drama because drama makes them feel important. They push your buttons because your reaction gives them a sense of power. When you stop providing these rewards, their behavior becomes unrewarding. And humans, even toxic ones, eventually stop behaviors that don't pay off. But here's where most people get this wrong. They think the Grey Rock Method means being rude, cold, or obviously dismissive. That's not grey rocking. That's being antagonistic. And antagonistic behavior actually gives toxic people what they want: a reaction. True grey rocking is about becoming so bland, so neutral, so unremarkable that you simply don't register on their radar as someone worth targeting. Let me break down the 5 essential elements of effective grey rocking. Element 1 is emotional neutrality. This is the cornerstone of the method. No matter what the toxic person says or does, your emotional response remains flat. They insult you. You show no anger. They try to make you jealous. You show no envy. They attempt to guilt you. You show no shame. You become emotionally unavailable to them. This doesn't mean you become emotionally dead inside. It means you reserve your emotional energy for people who deserve it. You're not giving your authentic emotional responses to someone who will use them against you. Instead, you present a neutral, unreactive facade that gives them nothing to work with. Element 2 is conversational minimalism. When you must interact with a toxic person, you keep your responses short, factual, and boring. No personal details, no opinions, no emotional content. Just basic information delivered in the most mundane way possible. For example, if they ask about your weekend, instead of sharing the exciting details of your trip or the great time you had with friends, you simply say, "It was fine. I did some errands." If they try to start an argument about politics or personal drama, you respond with, "I hadn't thought about it," or "That's interesting," and then change the subject or walk away. The goal is to be so unengaging that talking to you becomes boring for them. They're looking for someone who will match their energy, who will get drawn into their drama, who will provide entertainment. When you consistently fail to provide this, you become uninteresting to them. Element 3 is information restriction. Toxic people use information as weapons. Anything you share about your life, your feelings, your plans, or your relationships can and will be used against you later. So you stop sharing. You become a closed book. You give them no ammunition to use in future attacks. This means no sharing about your successes, because they'll try to diminish them. No sharing about your struggles, because they'll exploit them. No sharing about your relationships, because they'll try to sabotage them. No sharing about your plans, because they'll try to interfere. You become completely unremarkable in your opacity. Element 4 is behavioral predictability. You become routine and boring in your interactions. You show up when expected. You leave when appropriate. You follow basic social protocols, but you add no personality, no flair, no individual spark that might attract their attention. Think of yourself as a background character in their life story. Background characters don't get dramatic storylines. They don't have compelling personal arcs. They just exist, serve their minimal function, and fade into the scenery. This is exactly what you want to achieve. Element 5 is strategic unavailability. You become harder to reach, slower to respond, and less present in spaces where they can access you. Not in an obvious or dramatic way, but in a gradual, natural way that makes you simply less available for their games. You stop being the person they can always count on to react. You stop being reliably present for their drama. You become unreliable as a source of attention and stimulation. This frustrates them initially, but eventually they give up and move on to easier targets. Now, let's address some common concerns about the gray rock method. The first concern is that it feels fake or inauthentic. And you're right, it is a performance. But it's a protective performance. You're not being fake with everyone, just with people who have proven they can't be trusted with your authentic self. Think of it like wearing armor. Armor isn't your natural skin, but you wear it into battle to protect yourself. The gray rock method is psychological armor. You wear it when you're forced to interact with people who have shown they will use your openness against you. The second concern is that it might seem mean or antisocial. But consider this. What's meaner? Protecting yourself from someone who drains your energy, or allowing them to continue taking advantage of your good nature? What's more antisocial? Removing yourself as a target for toxic behavior, or enabling that behavior by continuing to react to it. You're not obligated to be entertaining for people who don't respect you. You're not required to provide emotional stimulation for people who use it against you. Setting boundaries through grey rocking is actually one of the most mature and healthy things you can do. The third concern is that it might not work. That toxic people will just escalate their behavior, and initially, they might. When their usual tactics stop working, they often try harder at first. This is called an extinction burst. Like a broken vending machine that you keep hitting harder when it doesn't give you your snack. Toxic people often increase their efforts when their manipulation stops working. But here's the key. If you maintain your grey rock persona through this escalation, the behavior eventually stops. They realize you're no longer a reliable source of the reaction they crave, and they move on to someone who will give them what they want. Let me share a practical framework for implementing the grey rock method. It's called the stone technique. S stands for silence. When possible, say nothing. Silence is the most powerful grey rock tool you have. You can't say the wrong thing if you don't say anything. Most people are uncomfortable with silence and will fill it themselves, often revealing more about their motivations than they intended. T stands for tone. When you must speak, keep your tone flat and neutral. No enthusiasm, no anger, no emotion at all. Speak in the same tone you might use to read a grocery list or give directions to a stranger. O stands for obvious. Give only obvious, surface-level responses. Nothing deep, nothing personal, nothing that reveals who you really are or what you really think. Become the human equivalent of small talk about the weather. N stands for no elaboration. Don't explain your answers. Don't provide context. Don't tell stories. Give the minimum information required and nothing more. One-word answers are often perfect. E stands for exit. Always have an exit strategy. Know how you're going to end the interaction and be prepared to use it. I need to get going. I have a call to make. Or simply walking away are all valid exits when dealing with toxic people. Here's how this looks in practice. Let's say you're dealing with a manipulative coworker who loves to create office drama. They come to your desk wanting to gossip about another colleague. Instead of engaging with the gossip or defending the colleague, you simply say, MMHMM, while continuing to focus on your work. If they persist, you might say, I'm pretty busy right now, without looking up from your computer. Or imagine you're at a family gathering and a relative who always starts political arguments, tries to bait you into a debate. Instead of taking the bait or trying to argue back, you respond with, "That's an interesting perspective," and then immediately ask someone else about something completely mundane, like the recipe for the dinner rolls. The beauty of the grey rock method is that it's completely legal, socially acceptable, and morally defensible. You're not being cruel or vindictive. You're simply choosing not to engage with behavior that's harmful to your well-being. You're exercising your right to be boring. But here's an important caveat. The grey rock method should only be used with people who have proven themselves to be genuinely toxic. Don't use this technique with everyone who occasionally annoys you or disagrees with you. Save it for people who consistently demonstrate manipulative, abusive, or energy-draining behavior. Also, Recognize that gray rocking isn't always possible or appropriate. In some situations, particularly in professional settings or with family members you can't avoid, you may need to maintain more engagement than the method typically allows. In these cases, you can use modified gray rocking, being more neutral and less reactive than usual, but not completely shutting down. The gray rock method is particularly effective against certain personality types. Narcissists hate being ignored and will often move on to people who provide more consistent attention. Drama queens get bored when their audience stops reacting. Energy vampires need emotional responses to feel powerful. And when you stop providing them, they lose interest. But perhaps the most important benefit of the gray rock method isn't what it does to toxic people. It's what it does for you. When you stop reacting to every provocation, when you stop getting pulled into every drama, when you stop wasting emotional energy on people who don't deserve it, you reclaim your power. You start to realize how much mental space these people were taking up in your head. You begin to see how much of your energy was being drained by interactions that served no positive purpose. You discover that life becomes significantly more peaceful when you stop feeding the chaos that toxic people create. The gray rock method also teaches you something valuable about yourself. It shows you that you have more control over your reactions than you thought. It proves that you can choose not to be triggered by people who used to push your buttons easily. It demonstrates that you can protect your peace of mind through conscious choice, rather than hoping other people will change. This method works because it aligns with a fundamental principle of human behavior. People repeat behaviors that get them what they want and eventually stop behaviors that don't. When you stop rewarding toxic behavior with your attention and reaction, you remove the incentive for that behavior to continue. Remember, you cannot control other people's behavior, but you can control your response to it. You cannot force toxic people to treat you better, but you can make yourself an unappealing target for their toxicity. You cannot change manipulative people into healthy people, but you can protect yourself from their manipulation. The gray rock method is not about winning or losing. It's not about punishment or revenge. It's about preservation. You're preserving your energy, your peace of mind, your emotional well-being, and your time for the people and activities that actually add value to your life. In a world full of people competing for your attention, demanding your emotional reactions, and trying to pull you into their chaos, the ability to become selectively invisible is a superpower. Master the gray rock method, and you master the art of protecting yourself without becoming the villain in someone else's story. You become the person who simply doesn't participate in toxic games. And when you stop playing games you can't win, you finally start winning the only game that really matters, the game of living a peaceful, authentic life on your own terms.